Hello, and I'm Amina Aliyu. Welcome to Our Voices. I'm joined here by my colleagues Simne Shekoye and Nadia Taha, who is here in Orion Itangi Shaka's stead. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, good, good. But Nadia, I don't know if we can say the same for you.
Yeah,
Yes.
hello. Yes, of
With
course.
regards to
I mean, the current conflict going on in Sudan, I hear that over 100,000 people are forced to flee their home. How is your family?
Oh my God, the situation is really bad. My family, the beginning of the conflict, the first 5 days, it was really hard for them. Actually, they're just staying under bed because the shelling was very close to my family. They live very close to the army barracks and the airport. So that area was most conflict area in Al-Fashir, North Darfur. And actually, my family, some of them in South Darfur, my grandma's house in South Darfur, and that was one of the most difficult area in Darfur, Niala. I talked to them, they are really struggling, especially my auntie, she said, for like 6 days they had no water. So they just trying to get water from neighbors and stuff.
Every time we're giving reports, I keep hoping that this is one of those conflict situations where you hope that what you're hearing is worse than how it actually is.
It is.
But with regards to the reports, it seems like what's actually happening is worse than the reports that we're even getting.
And I can't imagine even what women and girls are going through with all this humanitarian crisis.
Actually, it's very hard because in this specific time, for them it's very hard even to walk out of the house to look for like even water or food, or you go to shop because you don't think like you can even get out of the house because it's not safe for you. Especially in Darfur, we had experience of women raped, women like violence against women a lot in Darfur happened. And actually what my grandma used to say, if your area ever saw a boot, you have to try your kids, take your kids and run away. They mean by the boot is the army.
The army,
yeah. So it's very hard situation in my home country, Darfur and Sudan, all over Sudan.
Yeah.
Certainly. So as you have just heard, in Sudan, conflict and instability has taken a heavy toll on its people, particularly the women. Weeks of intense fighting has left many homeless, hungry and traumatized. Yet when we look at Sudan's recent history, we see that women have played an instrumental role in peaceful resolutions as well. In an article by Michelle Gilliman, published on the Diplomatic Courier platform, we are reminded of the example of Sudanese female student activist Ala Salah. At a UN Security Council open debate in 2019, she spoke about how women-led resistance committees and sit-ins planned protest routes and disobeyed curfews, even in the midst of a declared state of emergency that left them vulnerable to security forces. Many were tear-gassed, threatened, assaulted, and thrown in jail without any charge or due process. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we'll be examining the long-term effects that such a conflict will have on women and the society in general. Welcome to the conversation.
That's right. So hundreds of people have been killed and thousands wounded since long simmering power struggle between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces, also known as RSF, erupted into conflict on April 15. The United Nations has warned that fighting risks causing a humanitarian catastrophe that could spill into other countries. VOA's Vincent Makori has more details.
More than 100,000 refugees have now crossed from Sudan to neighboring countries, while hundreds of thousands have been displaced by violence within the country, according to United Nations officials. Among the refugees and internally displaced is a large number of women. Sudanese women activists are concerned about the escalation of war.
The country in general has become unsafe for women, as many of them have been raped in several areas by armed men. Most of the women have become imprisoned in homes in which a large number of women are subjected to violence as well, in addition to the lack of health services.
The United Nations is warning that the conflict risks morphing into a wider disaster as Sudan's impoverished neighbors deal with a refugee crunch. Refugees from the fighting have been arriving in camps in Chad, South Sudan, and Egypt. Duaa Taha says the suffering of women is more than that of the rest of the population. Women, she says, are the ones who run their homes, and due to the fighting, they are facing daunting challenges in providing food for their children and their families. Many of the countries hosting new arrivals are struggling with their own crises, including food shortages, drought, and high prices. This has created a humanitarian crisis beyond Sudan's borders that international agencies are struggling to stem. Sudanese women are currently sharing the resources available to some, using social media to fill their needs. However, because the needs are many, it is expected that there will be a great shortage of materials and difficulties will continue.
One of the most important problems that we are currently facing as women after I have worked as a simple survey of the neighborhood in which I live is the lack of sanitary pads that are considered one of the simplest things. So what about sterilizers and pain relievers as well as a number of medicines that pregnant women need, who face great difficulty in reaching areas to receive medical care, which leads at times to miscarriage. Women will suffer from many of these problems, and therefore some activists have led initiatives to distribute sanitary pads from the surplus in women. This is in the case of Khartoum, but in the city of Al Janina, and because of the war there's a lack of feminist initiatives.
Sudanese women activists say they have organized many initiatives calling for cessation of fighting and demanding an end to violence against women. Vincent McCory, VOA News.
Thank you, Vincent, for that report. Now joining us is Niemat Ahmadi, a genocide survivor who founded Darfur Women Action Group. It's a women-led anti-atrocities non-profit organization. Their goal is to amplify women's voice and empower the affected communities and to provide a platform to advance unique goals with justice for all, equal rights, and the respect for human dignity. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
So, women had a big role in the uprising that removed al-Bashir in 2019. And recently, again, thousands of women have been demanding and protesting for a civilian government. How are now they being affected by this war, this conflict that's going on?
Well, unfortunately, when crises happen, especially like the current war in Sudan, women are the first to be impacted. As you can see, across the Sudan, women have been impacted by directly being under attack. There have been allegations of sexual violence, use of rape against women and girls. And as an example, over the years, the women of Darfur have been systematically targeted. Unfortunately, under the current war, they're not immune. The incident that happened in Al Janina, it is catastrophic. The overwhelming majority are women and children. Again, there are incidents of rape and sexual violence have been, even though women have demonstrated, as you mentioned, outstanding leadership throughout the crisis in Darfur and during the uprising in 2019. Unfortunately, women's priorities and women's agendas are not taken serious, and even the shortly lived interim government has not prioritized or included women issues. And unfortunately, because of the immunity.
You know, it's interesting you should mention that, because I find that Sudanese women generally in the culture have quite a strong personality. And in history, just Sudanese history in general, you've had strong queen mothers, you've had people with very strong personality. And as Seminist just mentioned, they had an instrumental role in the overthrow of al-Bashir in 2019. But how was that reflected in the new government that was set up? How was that reflected in the cabinet? And how did that express in society in general? Indeed,
the Sudanese women from Darfur to Port Sudan have shaped the past and the present history of Sudan. They have a strong leadership. Unfortunately, they were not included. And there is a fear that there are qualified women, and because women have the community and the society's interest at heart, they intentionally excluded women. They were not in women's participation. The percentage of women in government was less than 12%. There was only 2 women who were serving in the Sovereign Council, one of whom was forced to resign because she was sitting there as a decor. They have not been included in the actual decision making, and because of that she protested, and her protest did not get any response, and she decided that she cannot sit there without being able to participate, having actual participation in the decision making. And I think also it's because it is a military government, and when military is involved, they always consider those with power, those who can fight. Women don't fight. Women make peace. And unfortunately, it is also the failure of regional and international actors who are involving in negotiation. They mostly speak to a handful of individuals who are carrying gun or politicians, but they don't bring women. They only bring them as consultation in a very, very last minute after everything is negotiated, discussed, and signed on it.
Maybe Nadia, you can speak about the Sudanese Resistance Committee. This group has been playing a big role in organizing mass rallies and also now to bringing humanitarian efforts to people. But they are also criticized for not including women so much. Maybe does it have anything to do with their effectiveness?
Actually, what Niemat said, I totally agree with her. Women in Sudan, they're always saying that when there is a protest being organized, when there is any rally or civil disobedience, women are in front of the lines. And I've seen a lot of women are trying to help me, in front of the lines. They're trying to even throw away the barrel of the tear gas. So they've been very strong in front of all the rallies, but they're saying when it comes to the power sharing, they've forgotten. They are behind the screen.
Though I do have a question for both of you, and I know this is going to seem very controversial.
Yeah.
However, as Niemat just mentioned, when international players come into the game, they only sit with a handful of people, and they come and they discuss with people that have power. Now, I know that women have had a role in the protests. However, you don't see them in the front lines of the war. On the contrary, they're the ones who are taking the brunt of all of that. So when it comes, because of the volatile history of Sudan, do you think it contributes as to why when the going gets tough, women aren't actually put in the discussion room?
Actually,
well,
okay,
yeah, you go ahead. Yeah, that's not a true statement, I think. If we are talking about coming to the going get tough, imagine the women of Darfur have been living in camp when men either were forced to flee or being killed or forced to go out to fight. Women are the ones who are there keeping the community together, being the first primary breadwinners. They demonstrated outstanding leadership, not only just being home caring for their children, their neighbors' children, the elderly in the community, but they also serve as spokesperson for their communities, meeting with international delegates, going out speaking up. But the problem is it has a lot to do with the stereotype in the society, the male dominant nature of our society, but also the political spaces are mostly dominated by male, and then lack of resources. For instance, we were talking about we should not be waiting until we get invited. We should prepare women with their agenda to go to any talk. But if you don't have resources, if the talks are taking place in South Sudan or in Ethiopia or any other country, women are the one who usually compromise, sacrifice for their children.
And you don't think that this has to do with just their gender roles, that they better serve the community by holding the home front down?
Yes, that's exactly how they perceive. But I think also women are more aware of the issues. When they come out, they don't come out just to serve food and water. They're out there, as Nadia mentioned, they are resisting, they are protesting, and they also, including they're picking the bomb of the tear gas throwing back into protesters.
And that is true. And we'll hold on to that thought. We'll continue the conversation. But it's now time for a short break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation. We want to ask our audience to share with us other fundamental political changes where women have led in your communities. That's not common knowledge to the rest of us. We're on Facebook at VOA Africa. On Instagram and Twitter, we are on VOA Our Voices. We are also on WhatsApp, and our number is US country code +1 202 503 9025. We'll be back.
health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Welcome back to Our Voices. Before we get back to our discussion, let's hear from two women from the ground in Khartoum, Rafia Mahmoud and Shadia Abdul Rahman, to see what people are saying about the conflict in Your Voice segment.
My name is Rafia Muhammad, and I'm traveling from Khartoum to the city of Kosti because of the insecurity in which Khartoum lives. We have suffered enough. I live in Al Amrati neighborhood. Sorry, repeat. My name is Rafia Muhammad, and I'm traveling from Khartoum to the city of Kosti because of the insecurity in which Khartoum lives, and we have suffered enough. I live in Al Amrat neighborhood, near the places of armed clashes. But thank God for this short truce and the current quietness. I will go to the city of Kosti. Tickets are very expensive and difficult to obtain. I came to the land port early and waited for many hours to get a ticket. And some people do not have the ability to buy a ticket. I have a car, but I cannot travel with it due to the lack of fuel. So I took public transportation to reach my family in Kosti safely.
My name is Shadia Abdul Rahman. I am traveling to the city of Kosti because circumstances have changed, and we hoped the situation would be better with the increasing rumors and horrific news about the war. We are living in insecurity, so we decided to leave to a safe place because we have children. We will go to our relatives in Kosti, but if the situation becomes better in Khartoum, we will return because our homes, cars and all our things are in Khartoum. So we are between two difficult choices, traveling and staying. We do not know how the road will be with these expensive ticket prices and the exploitation of crises.
All right, guys, let's get into it.
Yes, we still with us. We still have Niemat Ahmadi, founder of the Darfur Women Action Group. So, as you said earlier, as we discussed, women obviously are paying the highest price in this ongoing conflict and in all conflicts happening in Sudan. Just the first week of this current conflict, I read that 24,000 pregnant women who were due that week were not even able to access hospitals. So, how is the humanitarian condition right now?
Unfortunately, it is catastrophic right now. It is dangerous because many hospitals are shut down. Some of them have been bombed, and people cannot leave their home. Many people trapped at home. And also there is a warehouse where the medical supplies are stored, have been bombed. This is the major medical supply store in the country. Right now, there is no additional supplies coming to these hospitals. Some of the hospitals are in close proximities to where people are fighting. So because of safety, they cannot operate. Medical staff are not safe. Just 3 days ago, they bombed Sharganil Hospital. So the airplane is randomly going around and bombing. So there is no humanitarian aid. As you have seen a week ago, all international have evacuated their
and then on top of that, there is gender-based violence.
And in a case of Al Junaina, they destroyed all the institution. The hospital was completely bombed. Not even a small clinic. There is no water, and some of the water sources were being poisoned. This was a very systematic attack.
Poisoned.
Yeah.
People in Khartoum are dying as a result of the interfighting between the two groups. But in Al Junaina, it was very systematic. They were going house after house looking for the indigenous Africans by the Arab militias to target them.
That's horrible.
230 people have been killed. Over 300 have been wounded. Most of those right now sitting on the street under the shade of trees are women and children with no medical treatment or any humanitarian assistance. We heard that there is one ship Red Crescent sent to Port Sudan. Unfortunately, there's no likelihood that the people of Darfur will see any of those because of the distance and the insecurity.
You know, the Sudanese people have been very resilient. Sudan has been riddled with conflict, especially the Darfur area, for a very long time. And I wanted to ask, whenever humanitarian aid comes, how far does it reach within the country to the people that actually need it? When you look at the number of internally displaced people, north, south, east, everywhere you look, you have internally displaced people. Does the humanitarian aid actually reach the people that it's supposed to?
Well, over the years, they have not been reaching all people in need because of the insecurity. Sometimes the incident will happen, like for instance, the case of Al Junaina in a remote area. Most of the UN agencies, based on the UN protocol, they confine into the cities when the security reach into certain phase. So they evacuate. People left behind, they only report on those who reach. So sometimes you see discrepancies even in the UN agency's report of the number of displaced. There were 3 million in Darfur, now there are 4 million, but they only report 1.5. So those are the ones that they were able to reach, unfortunately.
Actually, a lot of people, they don't know that the number of the Sudanese internal displaced people and the refugees. Right now in Chad, we have more than 10 refugees camps. Almost 1 million Sudanese, they live in Chad. And Central Africa, we used to have 2 camps. In South Sudan, we have camps. In Ethiopia, we have Sudanese there. And Egypt, even rich people up to Tunisia. But most of them from Darfur, either Blue Nile, Nuba Mountains. So now when I hear Sudanese talking about Sudanese for the first time to be a refugee, because most of us Sudanese, they don't talk about the area where they have the conflict. They mostly talk about Khartoum, because this is the first time our Central Sudan has the conflict. But before that, we have conflict in Darfur since 2003, 20 years. And then we have started another conflict in Blue Nile, 2012. And then another conflict in South Sudan, which is the new South Sudan, Nuba Mountain or South Kordofan. And a lot of refugees, they live. Ida Kam is a big refugee for Nubian people who are fled from Nuba Mountains. So those areas, a lot of people, they don't talk about it. And if we come to the internal displaced people in Sudan, especially in Darfur, the most big 3 cities, the capital of South Darfur, the capital of North Darfur, the capital of West Darfur, where Niemat was talking about Al Junaina, all of it is surrounded with internal displaced people. Thousands of them, they fled in the big city and they surrounded my city for the 4 directions, west, east, all of it is refugees.
Actually, you grew up in Darfur, right, where there is a lot of conflict. And also you were a reporter, you reported from the ground to, you covered conflicts. So how difficult is it for a journalist like yourself?
A female journalist.
Exactly, to be able to tell the stories of this humanitarian crisis.
Actually, one thing I want to talk about it is like being a journalist and covering the conflict for your own people. It's really hard even to balance, to know what's happening. Sometimes I go to, I've been in refugees camp. I went to Chad refugees camp, Brejin, Trejin, Farshani. I went to the east part, all of it, to see how my people, they fled there. And actually when the war started in Darfur 2003, I was just in high school, I was a kid. But I saw how difficult people are running to the city. Actually when people, they arrive newly before they get the humanitarian aid, they used to they don't have a blanket to cover their kids. Like some of them, they try to bury them to just until the humanitarian assistance to come to them. I used to cry. So when I was a journalist to cover those kind of situations, I've been very sensitive of it. Actually, I went to law school, but I never went to my field because I saw is Darfurian people, they need more people to report about their situation, not to defend them.
Now, in spite of the picture that you have painted for us about how traumatic people's lives has been for the last 20 years at least, The Sudanese people have still been resilient. You still have marriages in these camps. You still celebrate new births. You've still found a way to pull out of all of the horrible situation that people find themselves in. What can you tell us about that, about the resilience of the Sudanese people?
Let me tell you about, you really touched into an important aspect. Over the years, we have been saying this. The women of Darfur and the Sudan are extremely resilient, and they have demonstrated unmatched resilience that we have not seen in the recent history. You know, one of the problems that the international aid organization, they come, but unfortunately they do not try to empower the local community. But as of now, as I speak to you, women are outside currently volunteering, trying to look for supplies for hospital. For instance, in Al-Fashir, women participated in the local civil society mechanism where a local government and civil society group came together. Women were the first, currently on the ground reporting, and they are also going house to house collecting money and food and cooking for the medical staff. So it's the resilience is noticeable, but there is an issue of recognizing this resilience. Not just recognizing it, but also investing in it.
Right. Thank you so much for all of your contributions. And that is our show for this week. We'd like to give a special thank you to Niemat Ahmadi, to the Darfur Women's Group Action, to the Darfur Women Action Group for being with us today. And also Nadia Taha for coming in for instead of Ariane. On behalf of all of my co-hosts, production team, and everyone here at The Voice of America, I am Amina Aliyu. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me.